It's official. The Nets have too many good players. It somehow happened after sending out Kevin Durant, after sending out Kyrie Irving. The Brooklyn Nets are now stuck in a situation where there just don't seem to be enough minutes for all the players who probably should be on the court. We're going to break that all down here in a second, but first, theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Doug Norrie, the owner and operator of dailyfantasysportsrankings.com. You don't want to type all of those letters in, dfsr.com. If you need projections or bets for FanDuel and or DraftKings, go check out dfsr.com. Not with us today, the host of the One Giant podcast, Mr. Adam Armbrecht, taking a much-needed respite after still making up time for himself after an unbelievable trade deadline where he put in the absolute work. All-nighters, I think he pulled the night of the Kevin Durant trade. That's okay. Taking a long weekend, much deserved. We're going to fly at this solo, and that's all good because we got a ton to talk about in Brooklyn Nets land as we head into the All-Star break. With the Nets, obviously, in a situation where the team is much, much different now than it was even just 45 days ago when they were, third in title odds and Durant was fifth in MVP voting or, MVP odds, and Ben Simmons was looking like he had made a full bounce back. And we're in a situation where we're starting to think about the championship and starting to think about, hey, is this a team that can actually get there? Obviously, a massive ground shift in the way that the Nets are as a team occurs at the trade deadline and leaves them essentially with a brand new team. Like anytime you trade away Kevin Durant and or Kyrie Irving, and to some degree TJ Warren and Markieff Morris, the team is going to look different. But I don't think anyone really anticipated, or if you did to this level of when you trade away Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and you get back picks, but also players, that there actually would end up being something of a roster crunch happening with what's happening here in Brooklyn. And that is really what we're seeing over these last two games, really three games, but let's call them the last, two, as things really start settling in. And maybe even specifically the last one where they were finally, by all intents and purposes, fully healthy. We're seeing a situation where the Nets might just have too many good players. Do they have any great players? Well, we'll see on Mikal Bridges. But even him, let's even if we did a bullish placeholder on great player for Mikal Bridges, we're not going to put this team in anything like having superstars, but they are in a situation now where yes, no superstars, but NBA role players. Oh my goodness, they're lousy with these guys. They have too many guys now at this point to actually fill. There's 240 minutes in an NBA basketball game, as long as you don't go to overtime, is now not enough minutes for this current Brooklyn Nets team. It's really actually something somewhat predictable when you know that you're bringing in 2-for-1 players, like you bring in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. You bring in Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, who we already know are NBA role players or more that were getting good minutes on good teams in Phoenix or in Dallas. So the math from that degree, from that standpoint, probably should have been easier to kind of see this coming. And at the same time, it's kind of hard sometimes when you're in knee deep with a team every single day. You kind of just get used to the players that you get used to, and you get used to seeing those players, and you kind of understand the carved out role they had in a previous iteration. But now that the things have shifted for the Brooklyn Nets, we're seeing a real roster crunch when it comes to guys getting minutes. And frankly, good NBA players are not playing. That's not something you see every day. And we're going to go through all the minutes here. We're going to go through the rotations. We're going to go through sort of like what we see as maybe possibilities, what might just be the situation here, barring major injuries for the Brooklyn Nets. But on a high level, that's really what we're getting now. It's really kind of remarkable for other teams that are scrambling around to find, sometimes just to find minutes. I've got warm bodies that can take the court, especially some of these good teams. The Nets are not in that situation anymore. They're path has changed in terms of player consolidation and talent consolidation. But they're in a situation now where we're seeing that the plan for Jacque Vaughn and company might just be have to not play dudes who are really good, as role players to start the season. In some ways, kind of carried this team at different times of the season, or gave it, huge shots, got the fan base excited. Looking at you, Yuta Watanabe, where we're getting kind of starting to fall in love with some of these players to some degree, and now we might be in a situation where we don't see that much of them going forward. And it's a really, really interesting situation. On yesterday's podcast and YouTube, if you're not subscribed to YouTube, thanks for getting us over 5,000. If you're on the podcast, make sure you go over to YouTube. We did mention that we were going to talk about this and how the Nets might just have too many good players at this point, and that they're going to cause some real problems. And when I looked into this and we started doing a little more of a dive on it, I did notice our friend Lucas Kaplan, friend of the show, been on before, great, really, really smart dude, writes for Nets Daily, among other places, had actually looked at this very specific problem prior to the Heat game. And he went through how he was going to break down some of the rotations and what players he would like to see. This was prior to the Mikal Bridges breakout game against the Heat, although the core tenets of what he wrote about are pretty sound. I don't agree with everything Lucas wrote. That's not an anti-Lucas thing. He's a super, super sharp dude. But I'll go through some of the differences. The large scale problem remains the same though. So what he was mentioning as part of the issue in terms of the rotations, and what I mentioned yesterday, Adam and I mentioned yesterday on the podcast, the ideas remain the same. Where the minutes go, that's going to be a little dealer's choice. But when we're looking at a team that right now is comprised of, in no particular order, but kind of in order, Mikal Bridges, Spencer Dinwiddie, Nick Claxton, Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas, Ben Simmons, Joe Harris, Royce O'Neale, Seth Curry, Patty Mills, Daron Sharp, Yuta Watanabe, Edmund Sumner. That is obviously somewhat descending order. Please don't nitpick the order I did it in, but that's guys who at some point, maybe outside of Daron, guys who at some point this season have flashed, or other stops in their career have flashed the ability to be on an NBA court. Start high-level starter minutes on a championship team? Not everybody. But in terms of do they have the skills and talent requisite to be on the court for longer stretches of time than they're seeing with the Brooklyn Nets? Most definitely. But like with everything in life, and specifically in a basketball game, it becomes something of a math problem. And when there are only 240 minutes to kind of delineate between all these different guys, or to just section off between all these guys and put them each into their rotational spots, you run out of minutes really, really fast. And there's going to be some guys here like Mikal Bridges that are just going to get their minutes. I think some of these guys, Nick Claxton should get his minutes, although we can talk about where he stands right now in terms of fatigue and just the lift that he'd have to put up earlier in the season. And we can debate some of the other guys, where do you see Ben Simmons on this team? Where do you see Cam Thomas on this team? Where do you see Royce O'Neale, who started and played 1 million minutes and now is on the bench? This is such a crazy situation the Nets are in. They have too many good role players. Good long-term problem if you're looking to maybe pile some assets together to upgrade and consolidate your talent later on. Maybe that's more of a summer idea that we're talking about. But in terms of where they are now, it's tough. It's tough. You run out of minutes really, really, really fast. And it's in a very, very simple exercise. You will see that there are going to be players that probably have a gripe. Whether we hear about it, out in the open, I'm not really sure. But in terms of an internal gripe, some of these guys could definitely look and say, hey, I deserve to be playing more. And I think the Nets front office and the coaching staff would say, yeah, but over who? And I think that is the overall question. Going to get into where we specifically see some of these minutes going here in a second. First, Nissan's Most Electric Player of the Week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria. This one is so easy. We're talking about the Electric Player of the Week, Mikal Bridges, baby. I mean, after what he did against the Heat the other night, just to sum it up as we did the other day, 45 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 17 for 24 from the field, 7 for 7 from the line, scored 15 straight points. That is a lock it up territory for Nissan. It's most electric player of the week. Fierce, elegant, powerful, elegantly powerful, brilliantly fierce, electric. All the words that describe Mikal Bridges' performance, all the words that are going to describe the 2023 Nissan Ariya as well. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin to your ear seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. You can shop now at nissanusa.com. All right, and looking at how the minutes section off here for the Nets, just to reiterate, people go crazy. I know this. Sometimes you think, 242 to 40. Look, when you've been in projecting basketball minutes for the last, better part of a decade, like I've been through DFSR and just doing this every single night, that number sticks in your head a lot. And it's sometimes just a concept that fans just don't get. And I get it. Like, you watch a basketball game, you don't really think about these minutes like this, and you want your favorite players to play and you want other guys to play less, and you want this stuff to kind of just all work out seamlessly. It is a math problem, and you do run out of time because the time is finite here, right? This isn't unlike maybe some other sports that can just kind of keep going. In this case, there's just only so many minutes short of overtime. This is how I laid it out. And in terms of where I saw the minutes going injury independent from here to the end of the season, right? Or what I think that how they should kind of maybe think to play these minutes, how we can get players that probably deserve to play enough playing time, guys who need to develop or just get their value back, can actually step on the court as well, and how we maybe start thinking about guys who aren't part of the future, just aren't getting the time either. And this is this is a super tough one. And it's just these situations where, like I said, it's never easy to cut some of these guys out. I think the lock it up minutes that you're really not debating, and Mikal Bridges at 36. I think that one's easy. Actually, Lucas and I do agree on that one. He had 32 for Dinwiddie. I had 33 for Dinwiddie. That's fine. We're in the same range. He had 35 for Claxton. I put 30. Now, I think his number probably would have come down a little bit after this last game against the Heat, where Jacque Vaughn did talk about fatigue. There did look like there was more of an intention to limit some minutes. He did have some foul trouble, so it's hard to know exactly where it's going to be, but Vaughn talked about this specifically. I think putting Nick Claxton at 30 minutes right now is about probably where we see it kind of land if they're looking to not overtax him going forward in the season. If winning is important, but it's not maybe the be-all, end-all with a young player like this. Again, reminder, Claxton has played more minutes this season than the rest of his NBA career combined. So I think getting him, and he's a big man, and that's just a different kind of lift sometimes in terms of just overall working on the interior and banging bodies. 30 minutes for him feels pretty good. Cam Johnson, 29 minutes compared to 32. Okay, let's just land somewhere in the 30-minute range. 26-year-old Cam Johnson. Maybe we try to, boost his value a little bit. Maybe he's just part of the short-term future for the team. Restricted free agent. We'll see what happens with him in the offseason. Shown flashes so far. Like him as a player. I think 30 minutes for him sounds about right. Dorian Finney-Smith, I put in the mid-20s, like 25, 26. Lucas at 21. He was actually closer into what happened last game, where DFS only played 20 minutes, and those minutes went, they kind of got sectioned off to like the Seth Curry bit, and then Royce O'Neale. We'll see. I could see something like, DFS plays 24 minutes and Royce O'Neale plays 24 minutes, and that makes them 48. And that's just like one sort of small forward player, depending if you need a little more shooting, a little more scoring, a little more defense with DFS. Okay. Let's call that 24 each. Not like they're mutually exclusive. They can definitely play together. But I think we're kind of in agreement there. Cam Thomas, I have at 20 minutes. I'd like to see that be the number / maybe higher. Like, I think that the scoring is still kind of a struggle for this team, where they're going to need his playmaking at times. They definitely could use him off the bench. He did seem a little surly after the game against the Heat. That's maybe going to be a talking point going forward, with something we can talk about over the All-Star break, is like where Cam is just in terms of how he feels about his situation in Brooklyn. That's going to be a tough nut to crack. Let's say 20 minutes. After that, then the Ben Simmons debate becomes interesting. Now, we did see Lucas had him at 6 minutes. I put him up to more in line with what he played against the Heat, which was 20. I put it 18-19 if there was going to be a band around it. I think this one comes down to how you feel about Simmons in the future. My personal feeling with Ben Simmons is that the Nets would do well to just play him and try to get the confidence / the value back up. If it's an injury thing where he can't play, then I would suggest shutting it down. If it's an injury thing where he can play limited minutes, look, who knows exactly what's going on here? Obviously, the back recovery is going to take time. Maybe it's going to take longer than it has so far. Things can crop up because of back injuries like knee stuff. Who knows with Simmons? I would defer to play him more and hope that something turns around rather than bench him and kind of roll the dice on like whether he wants to be with the team or not. Like, this is a really weird situation to be in. I think the Nets are afforded the ability to kind of see how it goes and not have to care so much about winning because no one really expects them to go super far in the playoffs. And Simmons, a good Simmons would be kind of a difference maker. So I would default to saying like 20 minutes off the bench. And if you see him strictly as the backup 5 going forward, like was sort of what they did filling him in for Claxton and buried Sharp, I'm for that as an experiment with the understanding that it could not look great, but it's okay. It hasn't looked great at times anyway. So like, why? Like, I don't know. If you have a chance to reclaim some of the value, I would say go for it. But in general, I can see why if you're let me put it this way. If you're anti-Simmons, you're going to want this to be 0. If you are pro-Simmons, you're going to want this to be a lot more. If you're wanting to just, claw back some of what he was, I think you want it to be more. This one, I think this of all the minutes, I suspect this one is something like the most polarizing of the group. And then we get down to like sort of like I would call the back end of the bench. And I think we're putting guys like Joe Harris, 15 minutes, like Seth Curry, 10 minutes. Lucas had him out of the rotation. That could be up for debate too. I don't know where to land on this one. Kind of like on the one hand, it's kind of weird to totally bury Joe Harris. On the other hand, I could make a case to not play him tons. The defense has been really bad. He's looked a step slow. He still knocks down 3-pointers at the rate you probably want. Seth Curry, it's been such an up and down season. It feels like he's kind of never gotten right from the injury. He's a free agent after the season. If he's not part of the long-term plans, maybe these minutes get really cut. Sometimes with the injury stuff with him, I don't know, like his 10 minutes against the Heat, is it injury or is it rotation? I'm not really sure. That's something we'll probably learn as we come out of the All-Star break. That is the list, folks. We just hit 240 minutes. You'll notice that among that list, guys that were not included. So just so you know, I just went through very reasonable minutes expectations, depending on where you think about Simmons and Curry. Very reasonable minutes suggestions here. And that was Bridges, Dinwiddie, Claxton, DFS, Cam Johnson, Joe Harris, Cam Thomas, Ben Simmons, Royce O'Neale, and Seth Curry. We are at 240 minutes. Not on that list. Patty Mills, Yuta Watanabe, Edmund Sumner, Day'Ron Sharpe, all at 0. So this is what I'm talking about with too many good players. They have too many. Like, these guys should be playing. Maybe not Mills. Maybe Day'Ron. You think about him as a project, but this is what the Nets are staring at. It is a very weird situation. Coming up here in a second, I want to talk about what this means for some of these guys, what the Nets maybe should be doing instead, and what the future kind of looks like going forward for the rest of the season. We'll get into that in a second. First, if you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you have to try a Built Bar. We're done with the holidays. You're into the New Year's resolution. Maybe you're kind of slacking on the New Year's resolution. It's mid-February, post-Valentine's Day. You're kind of thinking to yourself, hey, I was healthy for a little bit. Now I need to get back into it. Go and try some Built Bar. Start with the flavors and with the stats. You have to try what they're throwing out here. It's actually healthy and it's actually tasty. You got the peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, churro, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, these candy bars? No, protein bars with the stats to back it up. 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. You can grab them at Built.com. You can go to Walmart, Sam's Club, basically anywhere you're doing your shopping. They're going to be available for you. But like I said, you go to Built.com, you get them picked up there as well. You can grab a 13 bar box of the brownie batter. Like I said, they got the churro. Those are at the Sam's Club. Or just go to Built.com and you will thank me later. Grab a Built Bar, Sam's Club, Walmart, or Built. WNBA.com. All right. Yuta Watanabe was and still is one of the best 3-point shooters this season, just overall in terms of shooting 48% from three. He hit massive big shots, had become a fan favorite for this team, and now he's relegated to like no minutes. It's just such a weird situation, and I wonder, guys like him, and then if you look at a guy like Edmund Sumner, who totally different skill set, but might do some of the things the Nets could really stand to have, like driving to the basket, right? He can hit some corner threes, which he was starting. Other teams were giving him all the corner threes in the world when he was playing, and they knocked down some of them, right? He shot 38% from three over this last 4-game stretch for himself when he was actually playing, and he scored 29 and 23 points in back-to-back games against the Wizards and the Clippers. And these guys are totally out of the rotation now. And I'm telling you right now, these guys would play on some of these other teams. Yeah, they would play on some good teams. Would they play tons? No. But teams whose benches just aren't as robust as the Nets are right now, these guys would definitely be playing. And this is what makes for such a weird situation. And I'm actually just not sure what the Nets are going to do. Now, some of this gets solved, in quotes, with injuries. Guys get hurt. Guys need rest. This is what happens. And you just end up kind of piecing things together. That might be what the Nets are banking on to some degree, is to say, hey, look, we're not going to play these guys every single minute. We're not going to run them into the ground into this kind of season. We want to, home games. We want to win. We want to put our best foot forward. That's clearly been an organizational edict for this team. But I don't think what you're going to see is guys like, running out 40 minutes a game or things like that, like the Raptors and teams like this. I just don't think that's going to be the case. So then all of a sudden, if you're not doing that and you grab an injury here or there, then stuff is going to start to open up. But if you're a team that's this deep, it does become a very odd situation in terms of who should be playing, just sort of the feelings around those situations, and just what your organizational philosophy is going forward. And if the Nets are in this kind of time crunch going forward, I think we could see some frustration from players. And I think we might see some frustration for fans, because the other thing that happens in in scenarios like this is if things start not going well, right? They lost 2 of their last 3 games. I know they just beat the Heat. Bridges went completely off. You start losing a couple games, it'll be very easy for fans to turn, media too, to turn and say, hey, why is player X not playing if things aren't going well? Why are we not seeing 48% from three Yuta Watanabe out there? Why are we not seeing, slash and kick Edmund Sumner, who's really good point of attack on defense? Why are we not seeing him out there? Why are we not trying to, work with Day'Ron Sharpe to see what's what in terms of he's viable NBA wise going forward? Why are we playing either Ben Simmons lots of minutes or no minutes? You can kind of come in wherever you feel on the Ben Simmons debate. Why is Cam Thomas not playing more? Right? This was a guy that dropped 3 straight 40-point games. He's going to play 20 minutes a game now? Why? And wait till the Nets have trouble scoring too, which has been something like a problem with this new iteration of the team. When these things start happening, I do think you're going to see, with the way the team is currently constructed, you are going to see some probably backlash around why isn't player X playing, because player X would be able to do it better than player Y, who currently is playing. And this is a problem Jacque Vaughn and Sean Marks and these guys might have going forward. Now, in some way, it's a good problem to have. You'd rather have more good players than less. In the NBA, you'd rather have 2 great players and then good role players. Let's try that. We saw how that worked out. Still think you do it a million times out of a million. But if you're going to go the other way now and just be kind of a good, not great NBA team, you can kind of run into this problem. And it's not like some of their guys, it's not like they're in they're not in an Orlando Magic, Houston Rockets kind of sort of tanking, play the young guys. Let's get them a lot of on-court reps. The guys the Nets have aren't exactly spring chickens either. We talked about it yesterday. Mikal Bridges is 26. Cam Johnson's 26. Spencer Dinwiddie, I think, is 28. Right? These guys aren't rookies to kind of see what we have going here. These are 29 for Spencer Dinwiddie. These are NBA quasi veterans who have all been at different stops and been role players in different places. And now, probably feel like they should be playing more minutes. The only one that kind of the only 2 guys that qualify, I would say, as young in this group that we talked about already is Nick Claxton, 23 years old, and is Cam Thomas, who I believe is 22. 21. And so those are like the only kind of young guys that the Nets have. Everyone else has been around the NBA block for a little while here and has seen their situation, especially for some of these guys, be much better before this trade. Like even the guys that were on the Nets, the situation was better from a playing time perspective. Like guys like Yuta, even Sumner. I mean, that's a little different because that was kind of in the trade deadline situation. And then guys who are coming from the other teams, like Bridges, like DFS, like Spencer Dinwiddie, like they're used to playing for quality teams leading into this. So where do you land? And I don't know if I've come to any great judgments around what to have happen here, except to say, I think this is going to be something we talk about going forward. I think it's going to be something that we talk about for part of the rest of the season is who should be playing. Why are we not seeing player X, player Y, player Z in the Nets rotations if everyone were to stay healthy? Other problems that could come up is like, should Joe Harris and Seth Curry be playing as many minutes as they are if they're not part of the future? I don't know. That's tough. Like Seth Curry, veteran, everyone loves him. He's played great minutes for the Nets in the past. Like Seth Curry, a lot of teams would probably like to have a very healthy Seth Curry on their team right now, even with some of his deficiencies. Are we going to sit him, play him 0 minutes going forward? That feels pretty weird. Joe Harris, who's on contract here for the next couple of seasons, and look, that contract might end up looking like a problem. Maybe it already does look like a problem. Is he all of a sudden sitting down? Because you're thinking to yourself, sort of for what? He's got 1 year, $20 million for Joe Harris next year. And, is he a guy that is a trade candidate for next year? Hey, he's going to have to play and be good if you're going to want to trade him. So you live in that situation. It's kind of like the Ben Simmons situation. If you're looking to trade these guys or, sign and trade in the offseason, like they kind of got to play. They have to kind of play minutes for that to be a worthwhile, scenario for the Nets. So it's a very difficult situation for the Nets to be in. I think like I said, I think we'll end up probably talking about a decent amount. Some like injury and rest will cure some of this. Cure. I hate using that word because that sounds like it's like a good thing. It's terrible. If these guys, specifically the injuries, if that's a terrible thing to be injured, it will help, iron out some of these things because not every player plays in every game. But the Nets have too many good players. That's just the long and short of it. They have too many guys who deserve to be playing in the NBA at this point, and because of the current situation, just aren't going to be able to. And we'll see how that kind of shakes out for the Nets going forward. There's only 240 minutes on the basketball court. The Nets have to play by those same rules as everyone else. And in the end, that means some players aren't going to play. All right, we're going to be coming at you through the All-Star break. No Nets, no current Nets really doing all that much in the All-Star game. That's just kind of the way it works. It was looking like they were going to have a couple starters, and all of a sudden those guys are going to be representing different teams. Hey, that's the way the NBA cookie crumbles. We'll take a look at sort of things to look at going forward in the Nets season coming out of the All-Star break, what some of our predictions are, what some of the just the hopes are for the team for the rest of the season and going forward. We'll talk a little bit about the Cam Thomas thing too, because I think that's worth mentioning, kind of how that situation is going to iron out. Obviously, we'll end up talking about Simmons, and then we'll just talk about the guys like Mikal Bridges, who tweeted it out the other day. New favorite net? Oh, baby. Think so. Nissan player of the week. Yeah, of course. All right. We get to this part of the podcast and I always forget to quote, make sure that you are subscribed to YouTube. We were climbing toward 5,000 and it was kind of, it was back and forth up to 5,000, then below. We hit it during the show last night. I'm just steamed past 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. Now we're headed to 6. Be part of that group. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Adam is always the one that pulls out the great quotes from the great American poets. I'm not going to be able to do that now. Adam's one of the great American poets. We will be back again next week and after the All-Star break talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.